Hi, everybody. Thank you very, very much for joining us today. My name is Susan Zarwal. I'm the Director of College Guidance here at USM. And today, for our Career Interest panel, I am joined with three very, very impressive panelists. First, we have with us today to talk about communications, Marcia Slater Johnston. She is a freelance journalist whose articles have appeared in the Chicago Tribune, the Chicago Tribune Magazine, Chicago Daily News, Chicago Today, Crain's Chicago Business, Catholic Digest, New York Daily News, and other publications. She's a Milwaukee University School graduate of 1960 and the winner of numerous awards. We're also joined today by Angela Pittman Taylor. She is the Public Relations Manager for Robert W. Baird and Company, and she is directly responsible for the overall success and ROI of Baird's significant commitment to public relations capabilities across its entire global footprint. She also leads Baird's Chicago area brand strategy, and she co-leads the firm's inclusion and diversity marketing strategy. She's also the winner of numerous awards. And finally, we have Kelly Wabashevsky, who is a marketing leader who collaborates with entrepreneurs and professionals to provide brand consulting and strategic copywriting to drive growth. Before that, Kelly has led global campaign launches for several big pharma clients, including Pfizer, Bristol Myers Squibb, AstraZeneca, and more. And she has worked as a strategic marketing specialist for an international architecture firm headquartered in Milwaukee and served as brand manager for one of the largest energy and infrastructure contractors in North America. So thank you, panelists, for joining us today. I'm going to turn it over to them now. We will talk a little bit about how they got to where they are, what they do, and where they think their industry is going, and tips for students who hope to follow their path. So I will turn it over first to Marcia Slater Johnston. Thank you.
Well, thank you for asking me to be on the panel today. I'm very pleased to be here, and I always love to talk about journalism. So I left the Milwaukee University School in 1960 and entered Northwestern's Medill School of Journalism. And one of the things I have to say about Medill, it was at the time a top journalism school, and one of the things that made it so recognized as a leader in the field was that it offered students a lot of hands-on learning, so that when you got your degree from Medill, you had learned how to do everything from photography to typography to layouts to of course reporting and writing. I was in the advertising sequence, so I did a lot of communications research, advertising research, marketing research. And when I got out of school, I hit the ground running, and I got a job in an ad agency in the research department. And I was able right off the bat to help write questionnaires and interview people. And I knew what I was doing. I still had a lot to learn, but I was prepared. And I think that's a very important part of anybody's education, especially in journalism. So I went from the ad agency, I went back to the University of Wisconsin to graduate school, because at the time I was entering journalism in 1964 and 1965. I was told that I could do better if I had a master's degree, then I would be considered on an equal level with men who had a bachelor's degree. So I went to Wisconsin, got a master's degree, and got a job in Illinois Bell Telephone's public relations department, and doing employee communications, which actually was much more exciting than it sounds, because I did nothing but feature stories, and I wrote about all sorts of things, including fashion, including health. I did a story on the engineering department and got to go up in the O'Hare control tower, where all the guys are who guide the planes and tell them when to take off and come in. So it was very exciting. And it afforded me a chance to start building a network. I did a story called Woman Alone, Target for Trouble, which I had actually suggested, which was how to protect yourself against crime. And I worked with the police department, the Chicago Police Department, to put the story together. And as a result, I made wonderful connections, so that when I started writing stories about sex trafficking and ex-offenders and Chicago street gangs and vigilantes, I had a network in place at the Chicago Police Department that helped me to not only get through the police department and get people, but also to be able to get into the neighborhoods and make the contacts that I needed to do the story. So it's very important to build your network. And through all these things, I ended up working on a consumer action line at a radio station. And again, I built a lot of contacts, did a lot of networking, so that when I started doing these stories that really were the bulk of what I did in my career, what was really, really the heart of my career, was because I was able to build sources and reliable sources and people to contact. So when you're looking at a career in journalism, you need to choose a school, I would say, that has a strong journalism department and that will train you to be able to come out of school to do podcasts, to be able to do video, shoot video, to be able to write well, to be able to ask questions, to be able to be good reporters, and to be able to have skills so that you can really contribute to an organization right off the bat, and they don't have to spend a lot of time training you. In terms of what is available to kids going into journalism today, you hear a lot about newspapers dying, and certainly we have fewer newspapers than we did 20, 30 years ago. But we also have a lot of digital communications. We have a lot of digital publications, and they're looking for good writers. We have a lot of local newspapers or newsletters or news entities that have sprung up that are really looking for talented young journalists to work alongside very, very experienced journalists. There are opportunities, excuse me, in broadcasting. There are opportunities doing podcasts. There are opportunities, of course, in cable television, which is kind of the cable news stations have kind of taken over from the network broadcast stations in some ways, but there are a lot of opportunities there. There is still, journalism is still a very viable career and can be a very rewarding career, and can be something that offers many, many opportunities. So now I'm going to turn it over to Angela, who is going to talk to us about public relations.
Thank you, Marcia. So I hold my bachelor's degree from the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire, which does have a pretty strong communications and journalism program itself. My major there was communications and journalism with a public relations focus. And it was helpful that I knew when I went into college what I wanted to do, but you don't necessarily have to know what you want to do when you go into college. I did also go on to get a master's degree in mass communication from UW-Milwaukee. But I would say that the key to building a career in public relations is experience. This is not a job that you learn in a classroom. This is absolutely a job that you learn by doing. And I started to do PR internships the summer after my freshman year in undergrad. And Baird actually was the second company that I interned with, and that led to a full-time permanent position. And in terms of networking, I think networking is really important. And the network I was able to build at the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire led me to Baird by first introducing me to Inroads, which is a program that prepares talented minority youth for careers in corporate America. And so they select high-performing students for their program and place them in recurring internships with sponsoring companies. And that's how I was placed at Baird. Baird was my sponsoring company. And my timing was really good. Timing sometimes is everything. I got in on the ground floor of Baird, establishing their first in-house PR practice. So I was actually their first in-house PR intern that they ever had. And over 20 years later, I never left. So timing was everything, and it's been a great place to build a career. So in terms of the day-to-day in public relations, one of the things that I really love about PR is that it's super dynamic. It's no 2 days are the same. And I require that to stay engaged on something. I need there to be a lot of dynamic nature. So in really simple terms, public relations is the practice of reputation management. So my team and I spend most of our time working to discover and proactively promote the stories and expertise that really support the firm's brand messaging around who we are, what we have to offer, and what we believe in. And I would say we primarily work to share the firm's stories and expertise through unpaid public exposure. So that typically manifests as news coverage, some manner of news coverage. And so I would say PR just on its own is a really powerful platform for career growth, because in order to do this job well, we really need to be able to broadly understand how the business operates. And so that has opened a lot of doors for me to wear many hats in addition to my PR role, both at the company and also just in the community in terms of sitting on boards and being involved in local community activities and things of that nature. So in terms of where the industry is going now and some of the areas of growth, I would say that PR expertise is probably needed now more than ever. With the proliferation of the 24/7 news cycle that Marcia just spoke to, and these digital platforms, there are really more ways than ever to really do real and lasting damage to a reputation, just frankly. So that said, some of the skill requirements for PR pros are really becoming more robust. And a lot of these things that Marcia just spoke to in terms of the changing landscape with the upcoming digital platforms, and just needing to understand that the newsroom, the business model for the newsroom is shifting a little bit. So some of the staff there are fewer staff and some of the shrinking budgets and things. There's also increasingly an overlap between PR and social media and some of the other elements of the marketing mix, because a lot of corporations are becoming increasingly savvy about leveraging their own web and social media properties to control and promote their brand. So what this means for PR professionals is that in addition to maintaining our fundamental PR skills and our relationship building skills, we also need to understand the digital communications landscape at a deeper level than ever before. So it's kind of like second verse, same as the first, understanding that digital kind of component is super important. We have to be able to keep up with the developments real time, and we really have to be able to play well with others in kind of a marketing scenario so that we can make sure we're maximizing all of our efforts and properly measuring our outcomes. So in terms of tips for students, I would say, I would just echo that need for the understanding of a digital platform. And it's not just understanding the operational elements, knowing how something works, but it's also understanding how to make them work for the business. So you have to understand the strategy side of that as well as a PR professional. So I would say the one thing that hasn't really changed and probably won't in terms of just the communications field overall and PR in particular is it's still really important to understand storytelling, to understand how the pieces of a story fit together so that you can isolate the aspects that are really going to matter the most to your audience and capture their attention. I would say that storytelling really is the through point probably of this conversation, and it really is king when it comes to being effective in public relations or communications overall. And now I'll turn it over to Kelly.
Thanks so much, Angela. My name is Kelly Wabashevsky, and how I got to where I am is similar to when Marcia said, lots of twists and turns. So I had an academic scholarship to Southern Methodist University in Dallas, and I started there as an English major. I thought I definitely wanted to be a best-selling author, and then I think after only a semester, decided actually, no, I think journalism is more real world for me. So went to journalism, and then halfway through my sophomore year, I realized that I wanted to be just a little bit closer to home. It was hard to get back for all of the family holidays from Dallas to Milwaukee. So I transferred to DePaul University. And at DePaul, they have a communications sort of umbrella major where you can choose which tracks. You can go radio, TV production, journalism, and then relational, organizational, small group communication. So typical classes, I elected for the the RGO, relational group organizational communication. And a lot of the typical classes included interpersonal communication. So just understanding the types of ways which we communicate just two people in a relationship. So kind of a psychology aspect to that one, as well as different in the organizational classes, you learn about the different structures and hierarchy systems within different types of organizations. So some are like a dictatorship, some are more of a democracy. And it's kind of helpful to have an understanding before you're in the real world of what that kind of ladder or tiered structure can look like. My first job, summer in between college years, was at the Drake Hotel. So, not a direct marketing agency job, working in the hospitality industry, just greeting guests as they arrived at the hotel. Later, I moved to the catering and convention services department, so helping with weddings or corporate seminars and events. And then I was at a rooftop gathering in Chicago's Rock Bottom Brewery right downtown, just networking and sharing that I was interested in moving to a very traditional agency setting. And that's how I got my first entry level role at a marketing agency in Chicago. So this particular agency had a heavy focus on pharmaceutical clients. And I would say my number one biggest advice for starting out or for an internship is say yes to everything. And you're a doer, you're there late nights sometimes if you're on a launch team. And eventually, as you get more experience under your belt, you can be a little bit more discerning in saying no or asking thoughtful questions as you kind of move up through the ranks. So day to day, that looked like having a lot of client calls to understand their pain points. Specifically, I worked on a team that was working on a type 2 diabetes drug. And one of the things we did that was really interesting was called patient ethnography and physician ethnography. So there were research groups where we listened to doctors talk about what it's like for them treating their type 2 diabetes patients. And we listened to type 2 diabetes patients listening to what their struggles were with managing their disease. And just to echo what Angela had said, it really is about storytelling when it comes to marketing, and just demonstrating that you understand physicians' pain points and that you understand the patient's struggle. That all comes through in the marketing material. The other thing that I would say is really important, both in your own personal promotion and just in the marketing industry, is communicating results. So as you're telling a story about your brand or clients you've worked with, you really want to capture metrics or statistics that demonstrate, the success, not just the efficacy of a pharmaceutical product, but, you helped your customers increase their bottom line from 60 to 85 in less than a year or something like that. People really cling on to numbers. They're sticky. So I would add to that in your results and your case studies, you definitely want to have those proof points in there. So where I think the industry is going, I would say there's a lot of need for implementation and a lot of need for good storytellers. So what I mean by that are, we have a lot of ideas or communication proof points, stories that we want to tell, but we can sometimes get lost in how to tell them effectively. Sometimes it's even harder to write a 5-sentence paragraph to explain your point than it is to write 2 pages. So there is a need for excellent writers, and there's a need for people who can implement and quickly, who can get things done efficiently. And so any tips that I have for you would include things like expanding your network now, getting your LinkedIn profile up and running, connecting with your parents' friends, you're just creating your own circle and your network now. And that will help you as you continue to either join organizations. I know Milwaukee has United Ad Workers. I spent a couple years in Florida. They have an ad fed organization. So just joining organizations with like-minded marketing professionals will help you continue to expand your circle. And that's just going to open the door for more opportunities for you.
Thank you very much. And for students who are listening, please feel free to enter questions into the Q&A using that button. I'd like to start by asking, all of you talked about different concentrations that you followed in college. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between the core courses and the different types of concentrations that are available in a communications program? And I'll pitch that out to whoever would like to hit it first.
Well, I think I advise I've been out of school a long time, but I advise a endowed professorship at Northwestern. And so I get to kind of keep up with what's going on and academically and what kinds of courses are available. One of the things that Northwestern has done is to have a very, very elaborate and successful excuse me, program of internationally of exposing students at Northwestern to going to different countries, to learning about different places by actually being there and doing stories and so forth. So this is one of the ways that the core courses, I think, have developed. I spoke to a graduate seminar a couple of years ago. I do some, in addition to my journalism work, I do some things that bring me into contact with the aging field. And so I spoke to a graduate seminar on ageism in the media. And the seminar was on, the seminar class focused on climate change and health. So it was a group of graduate students who were taking a class to learn how to report on climate change and health. And so the field, this is why I have great optimism about the future of journalism and the future for journalists, is that the field is changing and evolving to take into account what's happening in society. And so many of the core courses that I took, probably students don't take anymore, but they do learn to write. They learn storytelling. This is very important in journalism schools that Angela and Kelly talked about. And they're also learning new ways to look at reporting, new ways to look at delivering information. And so I think that if you pick your journalism school wisely and your journalism curriculum, you probably will stay level with all the changes that are going on in the world of communications.
All right, thank you. If I could also ask you, and Angela, you spoke about internships, getting an internship right away. And Kelly, that's something that you did as well. I'm wondering if you can talk about the role of internships in the college experience as you know it now, and working with interns at different companies that you've been a part of. How important are those college internships, and what advice do you have for students who are looking for different types of internships?
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to that first. I would say, as somebody who does quite a bit of hiring at kind of junior and mid levels, I will say, especially in the field of public relations, because applied experience is so important, it is something that we weight very heavily. So when people have internships and internship experience, that really matters a lot to us. And even when we're hiring our new interns, we look for them to have had some previous internship experience too. So it's something that really is foundational and really important to us as from a hiring standpoint. I would say if you're looking for an internship, something that I think is often, a lot of internships are paid these days, but I think something that is a little overlooked at times is that you can get really great experience in communications and kind of broad wearing many hats kind of communications in nonprofits and going and kind of volunteering your time. And that counts too. That also counts toward internship experience. So I would say, definitely wanting to cast a wide net, look at agencies, look at corporations, because those experiences can be a little bit distinct from each other. But then also think about nonprofits and volunteering. That experience carries its own value, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a corporate experience or an agency experience in order for it to count toward building a career.
That's awesome. And I would add, once you have a placement in an internship, remember that you're not only an order taker. You are there to learn, to soak everything up like a sponge. You're encouraged to ask questions. You're encouraged to, once, not day one, but once you've kind of gotten the lay of the land, you're encouraged to offer new ways or ideas to provide value to the organization that you're with. So you should feel empowered. You're not just getting coffee. You're really there to open your teammates, your new teammates' eyes to new ways of thinking. They haven't been where you've been. They haven't had the same experiences you've had. Many people in organizations have worked there for a number of years, and they're looking to you for fresh ideas and a fresh perspective. So don't hold back.
You. I'm wondering, next question, you've all spoken a lot about how much has changed in your industry in the years that you've been involved in it. Can you tell us a little bit about how you stay on top of the changes throughout your career? What kind of professional development do you do, and how do you seek it out?
Well, I'll start. I belong to several professional organizations. The most prominent one is SPJ, which is the Society of Professional Journalists. And I get, they have meetings, they have now virtual, of course, but they have meetings, they have publications, they have webinars. So it's very easy to keep up with things. I also belong to the Chicago Headline Club, which again is mostly, it's mostly journalists who are in the profession of journalism. There are not many PR people. It always was kind of exclusive, and I think it probably still is. But again, they have meetings, they have webinars, they have seminars. I also belong to a lot of other organizations, which I'd like to just mention. I'm on a mailing list for the Aspen Institute, which since the pandemic has had virtual programs. And many of them touch on journalism, they touch on ideas, they touch on a lot of things which are potential story ideas. They're in health and digital and so forth. So signing up not only for the professional organizations, which you absolutely should be doing, but also looking at things like the Aspen Institute, various alumni groups, and a lot of alumni programs, by the way, like for Harvard and so forth, are open to everybody. You don't have to have been a Harvard alum for a lot of them. And they will provide you with some an outlook on just the world in general, which for a journalist, however narrow your focus of what you're covering or what your beat is, in whatever medium it is, you've got to have a broad view. You've got to be able to know what's going on in the world and how what you're covering fits into the context.
One thing I'd love to add in regards to professional organizations is that they serve not only for your own personal career growth, but also to help improve the organization that you're a part of. For example, in a couple of my previous roles, I worked in the architecture, engineering, and construction industry. Those are also known as professional services industries. So I worked on the marketing side, and there's an organization called SMPS, Society for Marketing Professional Services. So every year they have an annual conference, and I think my first year I went and I attended a digital skills lab on optimizing my LinkedIn profile. So one of the things I did upon returning from the conference is I offered to provide my firm with a lunch and learn presentation where I took the information that I learned in that digital skills LinkedIn and presented it back to my colleagues at the firm. And for anyone who couldn't attend, I offered to have them send, just a meeting invite with me to help them optimize their LinkedIn. So you're not only growing your own circle at these conferences or by joining an organization, but you're also helping your company or organization that you're a part of. And you're coming back from events and conferences and things like that with valuable info to help your team.
All right. And then my final question to you, in the interest of time, you've all spoken about the importance of being a good storyteller, that is something that's essential to your craft and trade. I'm wondering, are there other particular personal traits or academic skills that you think are essential to being happy in your craft?
I would say just communication is key. So not just kind of the overall field of communication, but the interpersonal communication and just the ability to effectively manage everything on your plate, understand and help shape other people's expectations, make sure that you know where you stand in terms of those expectations, like just the ability to kind of keep the dialogue open. Is really important. I think, especially in public relations where the pace is just can be so fast and you can get run over at times, especially when you're at those junior levels and you've got plates heaping full of things to do. It's really important to be able to speak about, you know, like, here's what I'm working on, help me understand, you know, how this fits into the bigger picture. And to what Kelly was talking about, you know, speaking up and actually making yourself visible within some of these opportunities, I think is really important, and to not be very shy about it and to have a thick skin from the standpoint of self-awareness, not to the extent that you will just like accept cruelty, but to the extent that you understand that, okay, there's a lot going on here. And just because someone doesn't have time for me right now, doesn't mean in like a few minutes I shouldn't go back and ask again, you know, like that kind of thick skin where you can just kind of keep pushing forward and getting what you need out of it. I think taking initiative to see where the opportunities might be to improve the craft, to improve a process, to improve, you know, any portion, to just kind of speak up on that, I think is something too that I actually value a lot in people who come and work on our team, especially when they're newer, when they're in those junior roles, internship roles. They tend to see the world a little bit differently than I do. You know, 20 years in, I'm looking at the world and I'm seeing some things differently than they are. And it's a give and take. You know, it's not just, you're not only there to learn, you're also there to give, just like Kelly was saying. And so I think it's really important to be able to understand that, to be able to perform in that, and to just not be scared off by the pace and the personalities and all that other kind of stuff, because that just comes with the territory, any territory, wherever you are. Like, that's just how it's going to be. So you just have to be able to push through and still get what you need out of it and speak up.
I couldn't agree more with Angela's comment on interpersonal communication. One night I was watching this movie that took place on like a Navy ship, and I was impressed with like literally every line. They're like confirming the coordinates and confirming which direction they're turning the ship, and they're one person saying it and then the other person's confirming it like verbatim back. And I mean, don't do that every day at work, but it is important to be in lockstep with your team. And, you know, if you're in charge of meeting minutes from, like, I had all these calls with legal, regulatory, medical, and we had to capture all of their notes on our new brand guidelines. That was going to be like the global brand guidelines. So every country in the world is going to use this when promoting this product. You know, it's really important to capture those notes. So run it past a friend, you know, a trusted ally on your team, and really just try to get in lockstep with your teammates. That's a key component of having, you know, successful interpersonal communication.
Marcia, you're still on mute.
I'd just like to say very quickly that I used to, when I would teach my writing class at Columbia College, I used to say to my students, you can either write one story 100 times or 100 different stories. It's important to take risks. It's important to grow. It's important to look for new ways that you can tell your story, for new experiences, for new opportunities to use your talents, and not to be afraid to fail. I mean, if you're failing constantly, then there is a problem. But if you have successes and then you have some failures, that's all part of the game. And the important thing is that you enjoy what you're doing, that if you do become a journalist, that you love what you do, and that you continue to grow and you continue to contribute to the field and contribute to your readers, your viewers, your listeners, and not be afraid to take a chance.
I can't think of a better note on which to end. Thank you very, very much to all of our panelists, to Marcia, Slater, Johnston, Angela Pittman-Taylor, and Kelly Wabashevsky. And also thanks to Leah Wabashevsky in our alumni department for helping us organize today's panel and our other career panels. This recording will be made available to students. And thank you very, very much for joining us today and giving us some insight into the exciting careers in communications field. We appreciate it very much. All right. Okay. Bye-bye.